Good morning. Wow.
Good morning.
Yeah. Sweaty Sabbath to everyone. Literally, that's all I've been experiencing this whole week. Praise God for air conditioning, and I mean that so sincerely. Thank you all for being here. I've seen some new faces kind of crowding around the snacks outside, like you do, because it's snacks. And here we are. We've gathered together in our ongoing series on Proverbs, seeking God's wisdom, seeking ways to apply it in our lives. And we're going to do a couple things that are not like super different, but a little different during our service this morning. We're going to be doing some responsive scripture readings during the song portion, so be ready for that. I'm here to have a good time. I don't know about you guys. You guys feeling all right? Yeah, okay, good. Let's pray, and let's sing some songs together. God in heaven, we thank you so much for the gift that it is to come before you, to know that you are here with us, to believe that you want our best, to believe that you are seeking our good. And God, as we consider questions of wisdom and right action, right thinking, right knowledge, we want to turn to you. We want to open our ears and our eyes to really, truly understand how you want us to live in this world and to glimpse you above all else. So bring your presence down here. Manifest yourself in our midst, and may we see you today. In your name, amen.
To God be the glory, great things he hath done. So loved he the world that he gave us his Son, who yielded his life an atonement for sin, and opened the life gate that all may go in. Praise the Lord, let the earth hear his voice. Praise the Lord, let the people rejoice. Oh, come to the Father through Jesus the Son, and give him the glory, great things he hath done. Oh, perfect redemption, the purchase of blood, to every believer, the promise of God, the vilest offender who truly believes that moment from Jesus a pardon receives. Praise the Lord, let the earth hear his voice. Praise the Lord, let the people rejoice. Oh, come to the Father through Jesus the Son, and give him the glory, great things he hath done. Great things he hath taught us, great things he hath done, and great our rejoicing through Jesus the Son. But purer and higher and greater will be our wonder, our transport when Jesus we see. Praise the Lord, let the earth hear his voice. Praise the Lord, let the people rejoice. Oh, come to the Father through Jesus the Son, and give him the glory, great things. Praise the Lord, let the earth hear his voice. Praise the Lord, let the people rejoice. Oh, come to the Father through Jesus the Son, and give him the glory, great things he
do some reading of the scriptures, kind of just back and forth together. I'm going to read the parts with my name attached to it. I'm Max, if you didn't know. You're going to read the parts that say one place. The parts that say all, that's for everybody. Now you know. Listen as wisdom calls out. Hear as understanding raises her voice. The Lord possessed me at the beginning of his work, the first of his acts of old. Ages ago I was set up at the first, before the beginning of the earth. When there were no depths I was brought forth, when there were no springs abounding with water. Before the mountains had been shaped, before the hills I was brought forth, before he had made the earth with its fields, or the first of the dust of the world. When he established the heavens I was there, when he drew a circle on the face of the deep, when he made firm the skies above, when he established the fountains of the deep, when he assigned to the sea its limit, so that the waters might not transgress his command, when he marked out the foundations of the earth. Then I was beside him, like a master workman, and I was daily his delight, rejoicing before him always, rejoicing in his inhabited world, and delighting in the children of man.
By wisdom the Lord found the
Wisdom is a tree of life to those who embrace her. Happy are those who hold her tightly. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it.
From the highest of heights to the depths of the sea, creation's revealing your majesty. From the colors of fall to the fragrance of spring, every creature unique in the song that it sings, all exclaiming, indescribable, uncontainable. You place the stars in the sky and you know them by name. You are amazing, God. All powerful, untamable, all struggle we fall to our knees as we humbly proclaim. You are amazing, God. Who has told every lightning bolt where it should go, or seen heavenly storehouses laden with snow? Who imagined the sun and gives source to its light, yet conceals it to bring us the coolness of night? None can fathom, indescribable, uncontainable. You place the stars in the sky and you know them by name. You are amazing, God. All powerful, awestruck we fall to our knees as we humbly proclaim, you are amazing, God. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us. Indescribable, uncontainable, you place the stars in the sky and you know them by name. You are amazing, God. All powerful, untamable, awestruck we fall to our knees as we humbly proclaim, you are amazing, God.
He is jealous for me. Love's like a hurricane. I am a tree bending beneath the weight of his wind and mercy.
All of a sudden, I am unaware of these afflictions eclipsed by glory. And I realize just how beautiful you are and how great your affections are for me. And oh, how he loves us so. Oh, how he loves us. How he loves us so. He is jealous for me. Love's like a hurricane. I am a tree bending beneath the weight of his wind and mercy. All of a sudden, I am unaware of these afflictions eclipsed by glory. And I realize just how beautiful you are and how great your affections are for me. And oh, how he loves us so. Oh, how he loves us. How he loves us so. Yes, he loves us. Oh, how he loves us. Oh, how he loves us. Oh, how he loves. Oh, yes, he loves us. Oh, how he loves us. Oh, how he loves us. Oh, how he loves. So we are his portion and he is our prize, drawn to redemption by the grace in his eyes. If grace is an ocean, we're all sinking. So heaven meets earth like a sloppy wet kiss, and my heart turns violently inside of my chest. I don't have time to maintain these regrets when I think about the way that he loves us. Oh, how he loves us. Oh, how he loves us. Oh, how he loves. Oh, yes, he loves us. Oh, how he
indescribable, uncontainable. You place the stars in the sky and you know them by name. You are amazing, God. Incomparable, unchangeable. You see the depths of my heart and you love me the same. You are amazing, God. And oh, how He loves us so. Oh, how He loves us. How He loves us so. Hear these words. My child, listen when your father corrects you. Don't neglect your mother's instruction. What you learn from them will crown you with grace and be a chain of honor around your neck.
The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction.
My child, never forget the things I have taught you. Store my commands in your heart. If you do this, you will live many years, and your life will be satisfying. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge Him, and He shall direct your paths. Oh, I've heard 1,000 stories of what they think you're like, but I've heard the tender whisper of love in the dead of night, and they tell me that you're pleased and that I'm never alone. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. Oh, and I've seen many searching for answers far and wide, but I know we're all searching for answers. Only you provide, 'cause you know just what we need before we say a word. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us.
It's who you are. It's who you are. And I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. Say you're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are. And I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us.
Happy Sabbath, everyone. So I am Janelle Robinson, and I'm a recent graduate from the Master of Architecture program here at Andrews, and I'd just like to share with you a bit of my personal testimony this morning. So, next slide. This is me. At 7 years old in my country, Trinidad and Tobago, heading off to a new primary school, first day, first year. And at this stage, there were so many things going on in my life. And I just want to stop and encourage all of us to think about, if you could remember, think about this time in your life when God has blessed you with strong influences in your life to guide you to where you are now. This little girl, she was very inquisitive. I was the person that went along with my mother to visit her friends at their houses sometimes, and I'd be so judgy. Why is your house like this? This room doesn't make sense. What makes these walls stand? And I didn't know it then, but I think that God was coaching me into a journey with architecture. Here at Andrews, I had the amazing opportunity to travel during some of our class projects, and this one in particular was one of my favorites. It's a school for girls in Madaba, Jordan, well, Amman in particular. And in the next slide, you'll see us interacting with some of these girls. It was a community project where us architecture students, we had the chance to paint a beautiful mural in one of the walls surrounding a courtyard in their school. And these are some of the friends I made. Thank God for Instagram and Facebook so we can keep in touch. The importance of these things are far deeper than it seems on the surface, because being able to talk to other people, even though I'm not a parent, being able to speak to other young people and let them know, like, education is important. These things, they change your life forever. And many times I found myself talking to these girls, and they'll be like, but you're from a different country. How did you end up here? Why are you doing this? And when I look back at it, I can pinpoint exactly where it started. From the time I was young and encouraging them to study, well, I was encouraged to study, and so were they eventually. This is in Satélite Norte, Bolivia. And again, I was there for a different project, ended up talking to people's children again about going to school. This set was heading off to their schools at 1 p.m., which is when school starts for them and ends at 5. It's a very different world to what we know it to be. But again, being there, encouraging people, these things, they grow with you. Sometimes small interactions, they just stick and they influence you. So being myself someone who had influencers stick with me, I am now at a privileged position where I too can share that and give back. And this was one of the little projects. We decorated their classrooms and had them print their hands, something lasting that they will remember. Every time they see this room, they will see part of me, they'll see part of them, parts of their teachers, parts of their parents. And the last one is in Juliaca, Peru, which was just last year. And again, another project in a different country. And being able to speak to these children in particular and have them be part of the project was something invaluable. Many times we think, I'm older than you, I got this. But many times looking back at them, they have such a purity and such a simplicity about them that I think we should all remember as children of God growing up in Christ still, regardless of your age. And there's just so much overflowing that I think we can all take away from this, whether you're a child, young adult, more mature person. We are all still children in some way or another, and we are all in a position to influence each other positively, along with our walk with God and with our walks with each other in life. Thank you for listening, but before I go, I'd just like each one of us to take a minute to say a prayer internally, not just for the children, even if you don't have children like myself. Let's just take a minute to say a quiet prayer. For the children in your lives, it might be the children of friends or even yourself. Myself, I consider myself a child still. For yourself, and just think about your sphere of influence. I think that God has connected us all. I'm still a child, as you can see. That's my mom at graduation. And we all have that someone. No man is an island. So let's just take a minute, thank God for the blessings that he's given us, but also ask him to show us who can we influence today. So. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for your goodness to us. Thank you for your mercy, your blessings, and everything you have done for us. I ask that you continue to work with each of us individually and collectively. Help us to bring your love to the world. Help us to continue in your love in this world. And when you return, let us be fitted to meet you with each other. Through Jesus' name, amen.
Good morning. Welcome to One Place on this hot Sabbath. Should I say it? All of those of us who complained about winter, I hope we're happy and content. Amen. We're good to be here this morning to spend a moment together, but I want to pause here a moment. We have a large group of Chinese students with us this morning. Dr. Chi from the School of Business Administration is here, and he brought a number of students that are here this summer. And so we want to welcome you. Many of you have, probably never been to America, may have not attended a Christian service. And so we're glad to have you here. Thank you for coming. I hope this is good, a good experience, and that you're liking our campus, and that you are enjoying your time here at Andrews University. We're pleased to have you here among us this morning. Well, here at One Place this summer, we've been pondering the book of Proverbs, as you know, and we've been going through a couple chapters a week, and we're coming along. And you've noticed, I hope, that we are very far from the deep theological teachings of the Apostle Paul in some of his epistles, are very far also from our last series of the historical and political problems of Ezra and Nehemiah. We're just talking about wisdom this summer, words of wisdom that may guide our lives and how they can guide our lives. We're trying to think about these ancient sayings of this ancient king Solomon. Trying to categorize all of these proverbs is quite difficult. It's not easy because every chapter is a mumble jumble of all kinds of thoughts, of all kinds of ideas, of all kinds of proverbs, about all kinds of things. But there is one proverb, or a couple of them, they kind of repeat themselves a few times during the book, that is really trying to focus as to what wisdom is all about in the book of Proverbs. And it is in Proverbs 9, chapter 10, verse 10. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. Wisdom is a gift of God. It's acquired by being mindful of God's will, of God's teachings in the Scriptures and how it impacts our lives. It's being reflective about how God is guiding our lives and in various ways that this is happening. And then King Solomon also speaks about all kinds of aspects of life. As I've said, it's just all mixed up together in the same chapters. He speaks about sexual ethics. He speaks about work ethics. He speaks about friendships and community life, about finances, about leadership, and the list goes on. Just dozens and dozens of topics. Well, today our journey takes us to chapters 21 and 22. And there again, it's all kinds of thoughts about all kinds of topics. And I've selected one of those verses in those two chapters. There are many proverbs that speak about family relationships, and particularly about the relationship between parents and children. And these two chapters have one very, very, very well-known proverb. And it's the one that was just referred to here a moment ago. Train a child, or educate a child, or support a child in the way he or she should go. And when he is old, which really means mature, he will not depart from it. He will not turn from it. I'm pretty sure that a lot of you have heard this proverb before, and that if you're a parent, you have read it, you have claimed it, you've talked about it and thought and prayed about it. Raising children can be a scary thing. I see a couple little ones here. It can be a scary thing to raise little children. A young couple who has no children yet is quite hopeful about raising children, perhaps even a little naive. And as children, but that's all right. I think we should be naive as we begin families. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it. And as children get older, the challenges get bigger and more complex, and lots of wisdom is needed, and even perhaps even more once they get to be young adults, because life is even larger by then. Every generation seems to think that raising children is more difficult now than it was when their parents or grandparents were kids. And of course, there are various opinions and theories about how to raise children, and all of them have good points, and all of them have weaknesses. But there is one point that most theories of education miss. One point that I think is overlooked, although I'm not an educational specialist here, and I'm probably sure that many of you in this room are a whole lot more knowledgeable about children's education than I am. But there's one point I think that the book of Proverbs is absolutely convinced about when it comes to children's education. There's one point that the book of Proverbs is just glaring about that when it comes to children. And I wonder if you've caught it as you read the book of Proverbs this summer. I wonder if you caught that point. It's not obvious, but you've got to read in between the lines of every one of those single proverbs that speak of children education, parent-child relationship. All of these proverbs have the same point over and over, but you've got to be clever to catch it. And I wonder if you did. The book of Proverbs tells us that all children, our children, lack wisdom. They don't have any. They're not born with it. Wisdom is acquired as people grow up, as people mature. That's really what the book is about, to tell us ideas and principles and concepts so that as we think about them, we become wiser. According to Solomon, children don't have any wisdom at birth. It's not there. Wisdom is acquired as they grow up. He bases all of his wise words about training children and parent-child relationships on the assumption that children don't have wisdom in and of themselves. And therefore, parents are primarily responsible for training their sons and daughters and imparting wisdom to them. And without this wisdom, Solomon is repeatedly pointing out that people end up being foolish or acting foolish. That's the opposite side of what wisdom is about in the book of Proverbs. And so he said, this key verse here, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, mature, he will not turn from it. Many people have pondered about the meaning of this proverb. Some have used it in the sense of a promise, almost an absolute, unconditional promise. They believe that they can, if they follow the right formula laid out in the Bible, guarantee the conversion to salvation of their children. But I ask the questions, does wise parenting ensure salvation? Does wise parenting guarantee wise children? I think the right answer to both questions is no. No, not necessarily. Wise parenting does not guarantee wise children and does not ensure their salvation. I don't think that's the point of the proverb. I don't think that's the point. I don't think that's where it is. The point is elsewhere. People forget that the Proverbs are maxims, they're words of wisdom that describe how things generally, but not always, turn out. Some Proverbs speak about lazy people. You've read that this summer. Lazy people. But not all lazy people are poor. And not all diligent people are rich, like some Proverbs seem to imply. While similarly, when it comes to parenting, there's no absolute guarantee of success. You may be a very wise parent, and your children, well, you may think, are not that wise. Or you may be a very foolish parent, and the children end up very wise. In fact, I posted this thought on Facebook last night, saying that this morning, this would be the topic of this morning. And a friend, non-Adventist friend, secular person that we met in the month of May, replied immediately, or almost, there's sometimes during the night, because he's on a very, very different time zone, and he said, I know the answer to that question. My parents were not wise as to how they raised me, and wisdom does not necessarily come from parents. Okay. Children acquire wisdom by association. That's the point of the proverb. By association with wise parents, wise relatives, wise neighbors, and wise friends, wise teachers and pastors, and so on and so on. Solomon is keen to tell us that wisdom does not come by itself. You know, there's an African proverb that says it takes a village to raise a kid. That's what this is all about. It's all of us together that impart wisdom to children. Naturally, wisdom is shared, but wisdom must also be accepted, internalized. And that is done differently by different children, and decisions are made that impact life. We know that. Some decisions made by children or young adults are wiser and more helpful than some other decisions. We all know this. We've all been there. But I still think that Solomon said something very meaningful and very profound in this proverb. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. My wife, Chris, and I were involved for many, many good years in Pathfinder ministry. We were director of the PMC right here on campus club for about 5 years, about 20 years ago. And if there is one thing that Pathfinder Ministry seeks to instill in Pathfinders between the ages of 10 and about 18, thereabout, is wisdom. All the honors, all the classes, and the TLT program, and all the camping trips and the camporees, and there's the big Oshkosh coming up here in a couple of weeks, and the outreach ministry activities in the local community, all of this seeks to impart wisdom to kids who come to the Pathfinder Club meetings. How many of you have been in Pathfinders? There should be a lot of hands. Yeah, there are. Many of you have been in Pathfinders. You know what this is about. Many of you have been Pathfinder leaders of some kind. Of course, myself being a pastor at the same time, I was glad, very glad, to be able to baptize a number of our Pathfinders as they grew up, as they made good decisions, wise decisions, as we mentored them, as we showed them the good examples with working with them. Divine wisdom leads to conversion and salvation for a lot of people, but there is more to wisdom here, according to Solomon. It is wisdom about life skills and life in general, about how a person is to be good and make good decisions, about living as good citizens and good friends to others. It's a little bit what Pathfinder is about. Not just about, one aspect of life, the spiritual aspect, but also every other aspects of life. Even knowing how to tie a knot can be a very good thing. And so it's a skill, it's a wise skill that we try to impart to kids. And so we did that for years and years. And as I look back on those years that we were involved in Pathfinder ministry, our club here on campus had about 80 to 100 people in the club. That's a lot of people. It's a little church that meets a couple times a week, every week. And so when I look back, I wonder how I found the energy to do all that stuff. It was so demanding. I am overwhelmed by all the things we did, but we did it for the kids and for their parents. And I'm proud of these young boys and girls and teenagers and what they've become. Not all of them are churchgoers, I'll admit that, but all of them seem to be living a fulfilling life of some kind. And that's good, and that's pleasing. Yes, some are doctors, some are musicians, many of them even teach music, some are auto mechanics, some are social workers, some are truck drivers or administrative assistants, some are into information technology, and some are teachers or pastors, a few are engineers, and so on. And I look at all of them and I smile. Some have kids by now, and a little part that we played in their lives for a few years, paid off. So Solomon was right. Wisdom is imparted by mentoring, by giving a good example, by living your life with someone who's younger and showing a good pathway, showing a good example, giving a good example, investing time and effort in the lives of young people. And in the end, God uses this somehow to bring something about in the lives of people. Train a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, mature, he will not depart from it. One of the very basic principles that I kept in mind while I did Pathfinder ministry was the concept of creating good memories for Pathfinders. That's a long-term goal. It's a long-term principle. I never saw it accomplished when I was a Pathfinder director, but now I do, years later. And it goes like this. When a boy or a girl or a teenager grows up, has a profession, even a family life of his or her own, I hoped and prayed then, 20 years ago, that when they looked back at the time when they were Pathfinders, they would smile and get an inner feeling of peace and joy and fulfillment. I prayed for that all these stuff that we did, overwhelming sometimes, somehow in the future, when they would think about this, they would have a good memory, and it would make them smile and have a good connection and remember that good people help them along the way. And I say to myself, that's what it's all about. That's what Solomon is trying to say. that these good memories can become unconsciously emotional anchors in the storms they face or when they have hard decisions to make, that somehow wisdom has been implanted in their minds so deep that it guides them even without knowing it. That's what I hope this was all about. And although I've talked here about my experience in Pathfinder ministry, because that's my experience, the same can be said of the value of our school system, elementary and secondary, K-12, of our Sabbath schools, of our universities and colleges, all of us who are involved somehow with the lives of little kids or youth and young adults and teenagers, all of us are trying to fulfill somehow this proverb of Solomon: train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's older, mature, he won't depart from it. I think this is the wisdom that Solomon had in mind. I shared with you a couple of weeks ago that during the month of May, just a couple months ago, my wife and I, Chris and I, we walked the Camino de Santiago in Spain, that ancient medieval pilgrimage way of St. James. And we walked these 500 miles from Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port in the French Pyrenees all the way along to Santiago de Compostela in western Spain. It took us 36 days to do this. 500 miles, 800 kilometers. We started from this little village in the Pyrenees, beautiful little place. Of course, we were there at the end of April, so it was beautiful green and birds were chirping and so on. And then we walked the 500 miles all the way to the Cathedral Basilica of Santiago de Compostela. All along the way, we visited all kinds of churches and small medieval-looking villages. It was an amazing experience. We met all kinds of people, but one experience really stands up in my mind. The first night on the Camino, the first night that we walked that day only 5 miles, 8 kilometers, but it was 5 miles straight uphill, quite steep at times, going over one of the first mountains of the Pyrenees. And we walked all the way and we stayed at this beautiful hostel in the Pyrenees called the Refuge Orison. It's a beautiful place. It's just gorgeous, beautiful sight over the valley. And what's very special about this first night that we were there is that we all ate supper together in this big dining room. About 50 people or so, all sitting there, 3 very long tables, even more than 3, there's some behind here. And people are sitting there eating, all strangers, we don't know anybody, never met anybody there. And then what's very special is that toward the end of the first night, as we were eating there together, after the meal is over, the host invited everybody to stand up and to share 3 things: our name, where we're from, and why we are doing this trek, pilgrimage of 500 miles. So we went around the tables, all the way around the rooms, one by one. Took a long time, 50, 60 people here, and each one introduced themselves. So many nationalities represented, so many. I think the biggest group is probably the American group, but be that as it may, people from all over the place. Korea, Japan, Chinese also as well were there, and Europeans of all kinds, and American hemisphere as well. And there we go, here we are. And then the turn came to this young woman to stand up and to introduce herself. Of course, at the time, I did not know what would happen, so I don't have pictures of that here. She said her name, which I forgot almost immediately because there's 60 people in the room and, names are names, and too many names to remember. But then she said that she was from the Sunshine Coast of British Columbia, Canada. And I said, oh, another Canadian in the room. My wife and I are Canadians. And so another Canadian in the room. But she didn't say the name of her town. She simply said the Sunshine Coast. It's just like me saying, and that's what I did, I'm from southwestern Michigan. And usually people say, you're from Kalamazoo? said, no, southwestern, real southwestern. Now, even further southwest. But that's all she said. I'm from the Sunshine Coast. Well, I know where that is. I kind of been there, I've seen it. So I popped up, like many people have done all the way throughout the evening, and I said, oh, you're from Gibson. And she looked at me, amazed and shocked that someone in this faraway country of France, among a group of complete strangers, would know the name of her little town of Gibson, British Columbia. Well, we had no other interaction with this young woman, although we saw her a few times in the following weeks as we walked the Camino, because we all go at our different paces, we all stay in different places, we eat in different places, so we don't stay together. But each time we saw her, Chris and I, we remarked to ourselves, oh, look, there's the gal from Gibson. I don't remember her name. I don't know what her name is. But she's the gal from Gibson. 3 weeks later, after this dinner in Orison, we stayed at a very nice hotel in the middle of nowhere. It's a tiny little hotel, and it's quite nice. It looks fairly new, not old, maybe at the most 5 years. But I must add that before I go any further, that I didn't want to stay at that hotel that night. It's a nice one. The accommodation was fabulous, beautiful, no problems. I mean, it's a nice place. I mean, not luxurious, but for a small hostel-type hotel, just perfect. You see, the day before, we had been in Lyon, in Spain. It's one of those big cities along this trek. Lyon is a huge city. And going out of Lyon on this Camino trek, there are two pathways. There's the traditional pathway that follows a very dreary road, this one. There is this highway where trucks are going 60 miles an hour, and cars are going even faster. It's a 2-lane highway, and there is no guardrail between us and the road. And the road is flat. Wouldn't take any accident of any kind for one of those cars or trucks to plow into us in no time. There's no ditch, there's no nothing, and there's barely a few feet. And so the whole day we were harassed by the noise of the cars and the trucks and the wind that it creates and the wind tunnels and so on. I did not want to take that pathway. I wanted to take the alternative pathway because that one is in the countryside. That one is going through little villages, perhaps a few hills, whereas this one is very flat. But it's much quieter. But I couldn't find any accommodations to stay that night. I tried my best to find a place, a hostel, a little hotel, or somewhere where we could stay. I couldn't find. Anything is booked, nothing is available, or just the websites don't work. And so a week earlier, I had booked our room for that day at that village there along the traditional, more boring highway that I didn't want to follow. And within that week, I tried a number of times to go back on the web to try to see if there was a place to stay in the other town, because I didn't want to take that road. So I tried my best. Didn't work. Very unusual that nothing was available, that the websites weren't working, and so on. So I decided to make do with it, just to go with the flow. That's something you learn when you do this trek. And that's all, and just bear it, enjoy it, make the best out of it. There must be something. All that morning, we followed this dreary trail. Lots of noise, heavy traffic, scary at times. And all we saw was huge warehouses on the other side of the road all day long. The weather was nice, at least. That was okay. But that was about it. There was nothing else that was nice about this road. The hotel where we stayed at that night, so this one here, where we stayed at, was in fact a truck stop. You can tell it's a huge parking right in front, and right beside the hotel, a little bit more to the right, there's a huge truck parking lot. And trucks, they're the semi-trucks, 18-wheelers. And then the building beside that is the restaurant and the local bar where all the locals go for a beer after work. And so because we were a good 2 kilometers from the village, the only place to find food is that bar restaurant. There's no other place. And I was way too tired to walk 2 kilometers into the village and 2 kilometers back to sleep that night. No way, not going to do that. So there's only, I mean, we're caught here. There's only one place to eat, and it is at that restaurant right beside the hotel. So after we settled in, took showers, and dressed a little differently, we went over to the restaurant to eat. And as we got into the restaurant, there's a group of 5 or 6 Canadians, also from Western Canada, who are already seated and eating and chatting away, having beers and wine and so on. And so Chris and I, we decide, well, we'll get our food and we'll sit right beside them and just engage into conversation. And, you know, that's the thing to do. You meet strangers and you just chit-chat and have a good time. And so we were doing that, eating, chatting away. And then all of a sudden, to our surprise, comes in the gal from Gibson. Well, she's also Canadian. And when she spots us, and she had already met a number of us, she recognized there's now about 7, 8, 9 Canadians all eating together in this restaurant, and we're making a lot of noise. And so she comes and she sits with us. And so she takes a bite. She's not going to stay there tonight. She wants to move on, but she needs to rest and eat a bite, and she began to chat, and so we chit-chat together. After a while, she asked me what I did, because I kind of went around the circle. So what do you do? I said, well, I'm a teacher. Well, naturally, the next question that comes up is, what do you teach? Well, given the secular context in Europe, I never say I teach theology. That's a scary word, I tell you. You just say, I'm a teacher of theology, I'm a theologian, and immediately, people just back off. Here's a priest or somebody, and he's going to shove religion down our throats, so I don't say that. It scares people too much. So I say instead, I teach history of Christian thought, which is really what I do. I'm a historical theologian. I teach the history and the development of ideas and concepts and doctrines of movements in church history. That's my profession. And that's very safe. That's extremely safe. You use the word history and everything is safe, because on this road, there's so much history, medieval castles and churches and so on. Oh, she said, that sounds like theology. Well, now I'm a little amazed. This gal knows something about Christian faith. She knows something about Christian faith. Yeah, that's it. I'm a theologian. But I don't like to say that because it scares people. Well, where do you teach? If you really want to continue, where do you teach? Well, a little private university in southwestern Michigan. It's called Andrews University. Not St. Andrews, just Andrews University. Never heard of it. And that's usually where the questions stop. But not with her. So now comes the next question. Well, is that a university that's religious of some kind? I mean, do you teach some kind of church things, denomination or something? I mean, are you associated with some kind of church people? I said, yes, I am. It's a Seventh-day Adventist university. The moment I said Seventh-day Adventist, you should have seen her facial expression and her body language. It became so expressive with surprise and a hint of, what in the world is this conversation about? That I knew immediately, my wife did the same double take as well, that there is a history there between this gal from Gibson and Seventh-day Adventists. And I'm just about going to find out. My experience is that anytime something like this happens, it's negative. And so I become defensive. Oh no, why did I say that? Why did I have to say the name of my church and so on? I could have said, oh, it's an evangelical type denomination. Yeah. Would have been safe. Would have been very safe. And so my inner reaction is defensive, and I thought to myself, okay, there's some pain there. There's some pain there that somebody inflicted on her sometime in the past. But no, absolutely no. There is no pain, but only peace and joy. When she was a little girl, her parents became Seventh-day Adventists and went to Canadian University College, which is now Burman University in central Alberta, Canada. That's the same college where I went to do my BA when I was in my early 20s. And her parents and her family were there 5 to 8 years after I was there, after I graduated from there. And so immediately there's a connection. Wow, I spent 4 beautiful years in central Alberta, and so did she. She loved it there. She was about 11 years old when they moved there, or she turned 11 while she was there. She attended the campus elementary school, which is right in front or beside there of this central building. And she remembered that the pastor of the church at the time had baptized her when she was 11 years old. Well, quite a coincidence. I mean, we shared a bond. We both loved this place in central Alberta. So I asked her, did you remember the name of the pastor who baptized you? She said, no, I was too young. It's too long ago. I don't remember that. But he was so kind. He was such a kind pastor. And his wife was so beautiful and kind and gentle. She loved these people and they loved her. Well, from the general timeline she had given me, I knew who the pastor was at CUC when she was there. I knew it. I knew who was the pastor. And so I asked her, was his name Dan Jackson? Her eyes went big, and she smiled. Yeah, that's him. And his wife, Donna Jackson. Yeah, that's it. And more smiles. Well, I said to her, I know them well. Do you know what he does now, this Pastor Dan Jackson? Of course, she didn't know. Well, I explained to her that Pastor Dan and his wife, they're now the president of the Seventh-day Adventist Church for all of North America. And that I see him and Donna quite regularly. I see them often. They come here on campus 2 or 3 times a year. They're part of the board of trustees, seminary executive committee, and so on. So I know them well. And so I turned on my phone. I went to Facebook. I went to their page on Facebook and found pictures of Dan and pictures of Donna. She took my phone. I'm honest with you. The phone was turned on with pictures. She took my phone and she flipped through the photos of Dan and Donna's friend pictures and so on, and she looked, and the beaming smiles on her face and the eyes were so expressive. She was having beautiful memories. She was reliving memories of her time on the campus and what she had experienced with Donna and Dan and Sabbath schools and so on. Wow, I mean, complete wonder and amazement here. And I could see she was having a good time, a beautiful time. Well, we chatted, as you can imagine, for a fairly long time that evening about faith, about church, about life. Where are you at? What are you doing? And so on. About her journey, about her life, where she's at the moment, the difficulties she's living with. And then she went on her way to the next village where she had reserved a bed in a hostel for that night. But before she left, we hugged and we took a photo of her, or with her. I didn't want to be in that hotel that night. I had done everything I could to not be there that night and to not stay in that village. I didn't want to be there. But somehow, this whole bunch of Canadians ate all together. This gal from Gibson stopped there for a while before moving on to the next village, and quite a serendipitous encounter likely meant and prepared a long time ago, a long time before that. And it just happened at that very moment. And as she left, she said that likely Jesus had meant for this encounter to happen. Flashback from her Sabbath school days. Jesus had meant for this encounter to happen and this conversation to happen. And that likely maybe Jesus had something for her to think about for the next little while as she walked alone. We saw her one more time a week later at a cafe, this building on the left there where we had breakfast across the street from this grand Knights Templar castle in Ponferrada. Again, that morning, it was quite early. We had had breakfast already. We thought it was too early to have second breakfast. And we had a third breakfast every morning. We ate all the time, which was something to get used to when we got home and didn't walk 20 miles a day anymore. And so we were there in front of this cafe looking at the castle, and Chris and I debated, should we go in to have second breakfast now? It's a little early, isn't it? But we thought, when is going to be the next cafe when we can have that? Let's go in. And she's there with another group of another Canadian friend, and talking, chit-chatting, and we met her there one last time. And when we arrived and we introduced ourselves and hugged again, she said to a young lady who was now walking with her, she said that we were the couple that she had met a week or so earlier that had the same religion she used to belong to when she was a kid. And you could tell she was happy to mention that to that friend. It was a good memory. Good memories of a kind church pastor and his wife. Good wisdom imparted in that campus school and Sabbath school that somehow, someday, 20-some years later, may have some influences and touch somebody's life in a far-away country in a very weird encounter that happens in a hotel restaurant, in a bar, in fact. That's where we met each other, in a bar. And having this kind of conversation one evening out of the blue when I did everything I could to not be there. And so my prayer for you this morning, as you contemplate these words of Solomon, these wise words of Solomon, will you pray that God will use you to be this kind of wisdom dispenser, to touch someone's life somehow by tiny little things, that somehow your influence on a child, a youth, a teenager, a young adult will somehow have a long-lasting influence that God may be able to use one day? Will you pray for that? Will you be part of that chain of influence that God will use to train up a child in the way he should or she should go, and when she is older, more mature, she will fall back on that wisdom to be able to move forward? Will you be that kind of an influence? Will you pray to be that kind of an influence? I hope so. Go in peace and live in God's grace. Amen. Thank you for coming.